All right. It's I hate to say it, but it's our first lake service of the year. We got rained out last two times. As I was going to the office this morning, it started raining on me. I thought, man, we're gonna get rained out again, but we are gonna go anyway. So we're glad to have you all here. Um, I set out my message series a year in advance. So some of you don't know that, some of you do. Try and get everything lined up so it follows with the theme or whatever. But today, God knew what He was doing because it hit right. Because today we're actually going to talk about Peter and Jesus walking on the water. So what better place to do it, right? Adam and I thought maybe we could recreate it for you, but we both argued over who would be Peter, not who would be Jesus, because we knew neither one of us could cover that. But we didn't do it. Couldn't figure out how to make ourselves look like we walk on water, so we'll just go forward. When I say the word risk, what comes to mind? Maybe for some of you, you think of a relationship that's failed, a relationship that succeeded. Maybe some of you think of a business that failed, or a business that succeeded. But, you know, some of you, maybe even when you think of risk, you think of when your wife asked you this morning, does my swimsuit make me look fluffy? I didn't say fat, I said fluffy, right? And the risk is, what do I say, right? That's a trapping question, by the way, men, right? It's a trap, it's a trap. Get out of there. When you look at discipleship, discipleship really is a risk. We're trusting that what Jesus said, He will follow through on. And then when we step out in faith, that things are going to work out. I looked up a few quotes on the old interweb on risk. If you're not willing to risk the unusual, you will have to settle for the ordinary. That was from Jim Rohn. Uh, Risk must be taken because the greatest hazard in life is to risk nothing. Leo Buscaglia or Buscaglia, I don't know. I know I'm butchering him. That's all right. Risk is the price you pay for opportunity. I know this guy, Tom Selleck, Magnum PI, right? That's a good quote. Risk is the price you pay for opportunity. To win, you have to risk loss. That's a good one, right? If you never take the field, you can't win or lose, right? Bear Grylls, you know him, right? The guy that drops all these and he survives and gets through everything. Here's what he said. He said, without risk, there can be no growth. Without risk, there can be no growth. Because if we don't risk letting go of what we have and changing or seeing something different, there can be no growth. Discipleship, in its name, is about growing into the image of Christ. So, in discipleship, there is an element of risk. I remember I've been thinking recently about my kids, especially this weekend. Most of them were home for Katie and Hunter's little shower thing. Um, and I've been reflecting back on our time with them. There's nothing like watching a little kid, right? Or a little puppy. They have no fear when they're little, right? Fear seems to be brought into them. Autumn there's no stranger she wouldn't go hug, right? She's still pretty adventurous, wants to travel, stuff like that. But usually risk aversion has to be introduced to a child, and then there's a fear because there was pain or there was loss that they don't want to endure again. I remember one time we were getting Autumn ready for a bath, and we were at my in-laws, and Deanna ran the water like she normally does. Went in to put Autumn in the water, and all of a sudden I heard Autumn scream and cry. Never hear that when Autumn went into a bath. Autumn liked water, wasn't an issue. Well, the hot knob had got bumped a little bit too much, more than what Deanna had thought, and the water was actually pretty hot. Now it didn't burn her or anything, but Autumn was averted to bath time for quite a while after that. She wanted to make sure, touch everything. I mean, she was maybe a little bit over a year at the time. So our experiences and not wanting to endure pain or uncomfortableness is often what leads us or gets us in our lives to risk aversion. The older you get, guess what? The less risk we take, right? When I was a kid, I would jump out of the back of the tailgate of a truck, no problem, right? Yes, get down out of that truck. Now I'm trying to maneuver and hold on to the tailgate. How do I get my leg down? Even getting into the truck, I almost have to roll in and everyone says, oh, you're a sissy if you have those stairs on your truck. I wish my truck, I need to buy a new one just to have stairs so I can get up on my truck. I'll own it. I'm an old man. It's okay, right? But the older we get, we've had a lot of pain or experiences in our life, So we are afraid to even risk things anymore. You don't see a lot of older guys usually starting new businesses unless they've started businesses in the past. We're afraid. We don't want to lose everything we've built up, everything we have. So let's get into our story. It's in Matthew chapter 14. If you want to find it on your phone, or if you brought your big tablet, have it there. We're going to be in verse 22 here in a minute. But if you go to Matthew 14, you're going to see that that's the story where Jesus feeds the 5,000 men. I say 5,000 men because there were women and children there as well. So he fed this great multitude, an amazing miracle. It was a long day of Jesus teaching by the sea. It's time now to send everybody home. And let's pick up the story in Matthew 14:22. Immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side of the sea, which is the Sea of Galilee, while he dismissed the crowds. After he had dismissed the crowds, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. And when evening came, he was there alone, but by this time the boat was a long way from land, beaten by the waves, for a wind was against them. And in the fourth watch, which is about 3 to 6 in the morning of the night, he came to them walking on the water. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, "It is a ghost." And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." Jesus sends his disciples over across the sea ahead of them because he had business across the sea. Jesus does what any of us would do after a long day of work, right? You come home, you just want to chill, you just want to rest. Jesus' way to rest after ministry was to get alone with him and God, to spend time in prayer and just breathe. So he sent the disciples ahead. He's going to catch up to them. Maybe the disciples didn't understand how this was going to happen. Maybe Jesus had a boat hidden somewhere and they didn't know. Who knows? But they follow Jesus' command and they take across the sea. Now, John tells us that they were about 3 to 4 miles into the Sea of Capernaum. I'm sorry, not Galilee, Sea of Capernaum. So out there that far in the sea, there are no islands, there are no sandbars. So when they see Jesus, the natural thing is this has to be a spirit. Something is going on, right? And they were naturally afraid, not just because they're not getting where in their boat. And if the wind's against them, guess what? You're taking on a little bit of water probably. Last Sunday, I took some time in the afternoon to go out and do some bass fishing, and there were boats all over on the water last Sunday. I mean, the wind was blowing a little bit, and as I dropped that trolling motor and I was fishing around, because I was sitting in the bow of the boat by myself, guess what happened when those big stinking wake boats would go by? Here comes the wake. Here it comes bouncing over the bow into my boat a little bit. I'll admit, a little bit of fear. I definitely was sitting on my little stool. So having an assurance helps. Autumn, when she was set into that too hot water for her bath, starts crying. What does any parent do? Deanna reached down, picked her up, held her in her arms. Autumn didn't immediately stop crying, but she knew the safety of her mom, that everything was going to be all right. When the disciples didn't understand what was going on, hearing Jesus say, "Hey, it's going to be okay," brought comfort to them. Jesus' words were very comforting, but you have one person that his words weren't enough, and that's Peter. He wanted to be where Jesus was. For all of our speaking, Deanna and I both were in the bathroom because I came in when I heard Autumn cry. "Oh, it's okay, Autumn. You're okay, Autumn. It'll be okay. You'll get used to the water." Didn't work at all. But when Autumn was physically being held by her mom, she calmed down. Peter wanted that. It wasn't enough for him just to hear Jesus. He wanted to be closer to Jesus, and he was willing to take some risk. Peter asked Jesus, notice in verse 28, Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water, and came to Jesus. He didn't just think, I want to be closer to Jesus. He didn't just say it would be nice to have Jesus holding my hand so I know, because nothing's going to happen to Jesus because he is God's son. So if I'm holding on to his hand, nothing's going to be holding on to me. Peter asked the questions. I want to move. Peter's willing to risk. Peter is a fisherman. He understands water. He understands boat. He understands that at no time in his career fishing did he walk on water. Anytime he stepped out of the boat, on the water, away from shore, it required a lot of effort on his part to stay above the water. But this time, things were going to be different. Peter takes the risk. He steps out of the boat. He gets on to the waves, and he starts walking. He was willing to take that risk. But if you've been in church and you've heard this story, you know what happens, right? Verse 30 comes up. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, Lord, save me. See, Scott, right there, getting out of the boat, taking a risk isn't worth it. Peter forced Jesus to step in when Jesus shouldn't have had to step in. If he just would have trusted Jesus, if he just would have stayed in the boat, everyone would have been fine. But you're forgetting what the other verse said. What did Jesus tell Peter? Come. Jesus wanted to be close to his disciples. Peter's question, his query, his request, even though it was over the top, Jesus wanted to meet it because he wanted him close to him. All of these men in this story were obeying Jesus. All of them. They were in the boat, rowing to the other side, just like Jesus had commanded. But Peter wanted something more. The danger overtook Peter when he took his eyes off of Jesus and started worrying about the things that were around him. We call those things in our life today distractions, do we not? The things that are always around us: family, work, downtime, recreation, bills, taxes, everyone else wanting some of our time, whatever it may be. There is always something that wants to distract us. Wait a minute, Pastor. Are you trying to tell me that I need to not pay attention to my circumstances, that I need to focus on Jesus? No, I'm not telling you that. I think God's word is telling you that, and Jesus himself is telling you that. Because he looks at Peter and he tells him, why did you have little faith? Why did you start looking around at everything that you could control in your own power? See, that's what happened. Peter looked around and he goes, I can't walk on water. I've never walked on water before. Look at the winds, the waves are high. This should not be happening. And as he started reasoning with his own mind, the distractions got to him. And as he started thinking, in my own power, I can't do this, he started to sink. Verse 31, Jesus immediately reached out. He reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" Why did you doubt? Think about that. Jesus reached out his hand. That's how close Peter was to reaching Jesus, to where Jesus could reach out his hand and grab him. And yet, even being that close, the distraction overtook him and he began to sink. Jesus, in that simple statement, reestablishes Peter's focus. He responds to Peter's cry for help, not with, how dare you? What were you thinking? Why did you doubt me? But yet he reestablishes his faith and reestablishes his focus. When they got into the boat, verse 32, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worship him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." I have heard many a message say how Peter and his example is far more powerful than the men in the boat. And I'm not saying that may not be true, but I'm here to tell you, as I studied this week, you do realize the disciples in the boat were doing exactly what Jesus told them to do. Get into the boat, row to the other side. That was the last command that Jesus had given to them to do, and they were following. But Peter, the request of Peter was something different than the other men in the boat. And Jesus responded to Peter's request, changing his previous command, and told Peter, you go ahead and come on out here to me. Does that mean Peter was a better disciple? Not necessarily. It just means that Peter's call, Peter's command, God's request, Jesus' request of him had changed. Hear me, please. And I mean this. God doesn't have the same call or plan for everyone's life. He doesn't. We all are made in the image of God, but we all aren't given the same gifts, talents, abilities. God has a plan for each of you that is different than me and is different than someone sitting next to you. That doesn't mean there aren't core values, right? We all have to come to God through Jesus Christ. We all have to give our lives to Him. He asks us then to begin to grow in discipleship. But that growth in discipleship, some of you grow quicker, some of you grow slower. We planted some tomato plants this year in those little tubs. A couple of those plants shot up like a rocket. One of those little suckers just kind of dwindled along. I'd put fertilizer in it, still seemed to dwindle along, but then all of a sudden it shot up. Were the plants just as important in value? Every plant was important. We needed tomatoes from all of them, but one of them matured, one of them came together at a different rate. Guys, your discipleship walk with God is going to have a different pace than everyone else. All of us are commanded, all the disciples were commanded to get in the boat and go to the other side. Notice this. They were commanded as a group, not by themselves. They weren't told to get in a boat each and row by yourself, make your own effort to get across. But the mission that Jesus had for them was one that He didn't send them alone. The discipleship process, growing in Jesus, going where Jesus wants us to go, very rarely has us going alone. Paul, when he went on his missionaries journeys, man, it sure would have been easier just to have to worry about one person, but he always took someone or two someones or three someones with him. That there is help in groups. We are not supposed to do this work alone. We were created for relationships. All are commanded to go, to obey, to be on mission together, but not everyone is commanded to do the amazing things. Not everyone is commanded to take the extra risks. I wonder what it was like on the boat when Peter stepped out and he didn't sink, right? I just wonder what was going on there. I can almost hear him, right? You can hear him talking to each other. He's going to sink. I tell you, Peter's going to sink. Peter is always the impetuous one, right? He's always the one that takes and jumps before he thinks, jumps before he counts the cost. Peter is going to sink. And as they're watching, all of a sudden they're counting 1 step, 2 step, right? 3 steps, right? We need maybe even someone else, maybe Judas, because that's the way Judas probably is in my mind. We needed help rowing. Why is Peter getting out of the boat? To show off, right? We needed help rowing. He should be rowing with us in the boat. And here he is out on the water, walking with Jesus. And then they see him sink, right? I told you he'd sink. I told you can't walk on water. And then Jesus reaches out and touches his hand. They get in the boat and everything calms down. This scenario I told you, it's not in the Bible. It's just kind of what I think, because that's how my natural mind would have thought if I would have saw someone stepping out and taking a risk that I know shouldn't work. But Jesus called him to it. Jesus asked him to step out. The boat did not sink. Peter walked on water. He had a setback, but he did what someone else has never done besides Jesus. He walked on water. We have a financial advisor that we put our retirement and some of our savings money with, and we haven't done it in a while, but when we first went there and even a few years into it, she made us take a risk assessment. Some of you that have financial or done with them, you've had to do that. And the series of questions is geared to see how much risk we are willing to tolerate with our money. Now, I'll admit to you, 3 years ago, I wanted to change my risk assessment. Because when I looked at my retirement account and our put back money, boy, it took a nosedive. I looked this morning and I'm pretty happy right now. My risk level is pretty good, right? I'm calm. Things are up right now. That doesn't mean they're not going to go down tomorrow. Why do they have us take a risk assessment? Because they want to make sure we're comfortable with the moves and the investments they put us into. What if you had to take a risk assessment today with your relationship with Jesus? Where's your risk tolerance? If Jesus asked you to, hey, I need you to step out, church needs help in this ministry. Well, that's not my gifting and calling. I know it's not your gifting and calling. It wasn't Peter's calling to walk on water until Jesus said, I need you to do it. Was it? Because he didn't go out and do it any other time that we know of. He didn't do it before. He didn't do it after. It was for that moment that Jesus said, hey, I need you to step up. What if he needs you to risk stepping out to try and develop a new relationship, to build a friendship so that you can share Christ with someone? What if he's wanting you to risk some valuable credits with someone to open up your mouth and talk about Jesus? See, sometimes in our relationships we don't want to threaten things by talking about God. But I'll tell you what, if we truly love someone, truly love them, we should let them know about the best thing in our life, and that should be our relationship, our salvation that we obtain through Jesus Christ. Risks. Guys, you can't move forward. We can't grow in our discipleship without taking risks. Again, not everyone's called to the same risk, and not everyone's called to the same risk at the same time. It's all part of growing. Are we willing to risk things to be closer to Jesus? Peter would tell you, even though he about drowned, even though he was worried and he cried out, he would tell you it's well worth it. Let's have a word of prayer. Father, again, thank you for this beautiful setting. Thank you for the beauty of your word. Thank you that your word, even though at times we don't like it, is quick and powerful and sharper than any two-edged sword. Father, as we think about our lives, as we think about what your son did on the cross and what he's calling us to do in following after him, trying to grow up into his image, that we're just naturally prone to wanting to stay comfortable, to do things that are comfortable, to engage in relationships that are easier and comfortable. And sometimes in doing that, we miss the chance to be closer to Jesus and see amazing things done in spite of ourselves. I pray that this week that we would all take a risk inventory and that we would be honest about whether or not we're where you want us to be in our relationship with you. God, thank you for loving us. Thank you for sending your son. In your name we pray. Amen.